Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turn out a poem, 673, The Love a Life Can Show Below. We're back to another comparison poem. We're back to questions about the afterlife and the comparison between this world and the paradise that this poem will end with. And of course, her use of that word is going to be a highly loaded word because of her Milton study, no doubt. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you worked through our set of introductory comments as well as our preceding 672 poems. We just finished with 672, The Future Never Spoke. Now, if you've done that study, you're going to see some echoes in a poem like this where you've got comparisons between the world and then some afterlife world that Emily's always a little bit dubious about. Now, this is another poem about knowledge, or epistemology as we'll reference it in our Big Five. And this is how she'll say it. The love a life can show below is but a filament, I know, of that diviner thing that faints upon the face of noon and smites the tinder in the sun and hinders Gabriel's wing. 'Tis this in music hints and sways, and far abroad on summer days distills uncertain pain. 'Tis this enamors in the east and tents the transit in the west with harrowing iodine. 'Tis this invites, appalls, endows, flits, glimmers, proves, dissolves, returns, suggests, convicts, enchants, then flees in paradise. Now, there are some of you that will say, who have been doing this whole reading with us up to 673, that this poem is in some ways fundamentally different. It even has a different sound as the poem is read aloud. And of course, all of these verbs, 12 of them, stacked one right after the other at the end of this poem with the dash. We have not seen this kind of listing per se exactly done this way. So Emily continues to shock. Notice we start with her use of the word love, and in many ways, 126 of her poems, that word will be referenced. The love a life can show below as opposed to above, right, you see, is but a filament. Now, you'll remember filament from 398 and 527. We'll only see it one more time in 1431. And then she'll say it, I know. In other words, there's things I understand, she says, and then there's epistemologically, and then there's things I don't know. And in this regard, she says, the love that we get to enjoy, affection, can we call it that, here in this life, is somehow different from the love of above, of that diviner thing. Obviously, heaven could be referenced here. That, and then all the verbs of this poem, that faints upon the face of noon and smites the tinder in the sun and hinders Gabriel's wing. In other words, there is a certain there's a certain kind of not being given the entire truth, the clipping or the hindering of Gabriel's wing. Of course, Gabriel, the angel, right? That's going to give information. Gabriel, the messenger of Paradise Lost, of course. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net over Paradise Lost. Then she'll say it. 'Tis this in music. Hints and sways. In other words, there's things you can understand in music, and then there's things that you will never completely understand. The power of the harmony and the like, right? And far abroad on summer days distills uncertain pain. Again, this idea of pain and the power of pain and the instructional power of pain. 'Tis this enamors in the east and tents the transit in the west with harrowing iodine. Notice, again, she'll suggest that sunrise can enamor, but sunsets will in some ways harrow or frighten. Obviously, the symbolism plays as well. 'Tis this, notice the repetition of 'tis this, and then notice her verbs, and notice the compelling verbs. Invites, but at the same time appalls, endows, that is to say gives, but then flits and moves, glimmers, and then proves, and then dissolves, and then returns, and then suggests, and then convicts, and then enchants. So notice we go from enamor to enchanting. Then, dash, flings in paradise. Dash. Notice paradise capitalized. You'll remember flings from 437. It's used in 13 of her poems. She loves that verb, and I think it's the key word of the poem. Paradise, as we've said before a number of times, is mentioned in 55 of her poems. What exactly is it that Emily's suggesting at 2A here? I think her argument is that our true knowledge, especially as a poet, is always limited. All we can do is gesture at things to come, especially in this poem, the afterlife. At 2B, what one scholar has called the barrage of verbs of this poem is quite spectacular. At 3A, well, I can't help but think, as I said already, of Milton's Paradise Lost, and the idea that, notice, there's an inability of Adam and Eve in Milton's classic to be able to truly appreciate what it means to be outside of paradise, to lose paradise until, of course, it happens. And then, of course, they leave, and those final lines that are so precious, hand in hand as they go out into the world. Finally, in 3B, what was a time when you recognized how little you actually know, and to what degree did that challenge you? I hope Emily's challenging you. Thank you.